And I'm Brandon. We are talking about some common knowledge and some not so common practices today. And for those that are new to the channel, I know there's been a fair amount of newer people to the channel. If you don't know, obviously I'm Brandon, like I had said, but we're coming from the last 7.5 years of homesteading in the higher elevations or the high mountain desert of Montana, where we were basically doing a lot of studying as well as practicing a lot of these rainwater harvesting and kind of desert practices, you could say. And that's where we're getting our experience from when we're coming and starting here in Arizona. And I think we're coming up, September, I think we're coming up on 2 years now. So that's the exciting part. We've been here for almost 2 years and we've gotten half of the Gabion Walpini finished. And we're heading into this year 2025 garden season. So yeah, always putting your 2 cents in. Appreciate it, General. So the uncommon practices that we're talking about, so common knowledge that I'm referring to, and especially with the thumbnail picture even, is the weather. So I kind of had mentioned it in the last live feed when it comes to just looking at the weather, and we had that recent snowstorm. So we actually have a video on that coming up next weekend. So I know there were some people excited about the snow and wanted to see what was going on here with that. But it was actually after the snow, we had maybe 1 or 2 days of clear skies, nice and sunny, melted some stuff. And then actually, I mean, the last week and a half, probably, it's just been windy and lots of moisture. So we actually had a lot of on and off rain and snow, which we kind of actually had. This will be probably the following weekend's video, but we actually had kind of a monsoon storm that actually happened where we had some sheet flow on the property. And I was actually able to go around and see a lot of the earthworks as they filled up at least slightly. And that was the super interesting part, is just that storm. And then pretty much right after the rain ended with that monsoon rain, then we started getting the snow. So the temperature dropped extremely low. It was a big warm front that came with the rain, and then it was a big cold front that kind of came right after it. So we actually got probably, well, I want to say maybe like another inch worth of snow maybe after that. So yeah, that first snowstorm was probably about like a half an inch, maybe a little over half of an inch of moisture in the meter. And then the monsoon rain and then the little on and off snow that we did have, that accumulated to probably a little over an inch of moisture altogether. So that was super cool. Actually, we definitely needed all of this moisture. And that's just one thing with the weather and just looking kind of towards the future, as well as looking at a lot of scientific reports and stuff like that. It's just one thing, especially in the permaculture realm, and I guess maybe just everybody in general. You know, we all look at the weather. This is the common knowledge I'm talking about here. So the common knowledge, what people know is the weather, and people know about looking at the weather, or, you know, tuning into the weather station and just figuring out, you know, how to plan their day or maybe their week based off of the weather. And that's a big essential part piece for homesteading, at least. And I think for at least my perspective, everybody should almost be a little more in tune with the weather, but also in a sense, kind of almost becoming your own personalized meteorologist, I guess you could say too, because knowing a little bit of our weather patterns and actually observing some of these more uncommon phenomena that happen, especially, you know, when we're looking at large amounts of moisture or long extended periods of drought. These are things that are super key and super crucial in my mind, and I guess my opinion, at observing and kind of making at least something of a priority on, you know, things around the homestead and whatnot. So, and that's just because the weather can dictate a lot of our future actions as well as our future planning. But then also considering when we're talking about gardening and tree planting and stuff like that, we really want to know our weather patterns. We want to know a lot of these actually uncommon weather storms that do come. We want to acknowledge these and take note of when they do happen. So that's one thing that I do actually mark down. We have our rain gauge at least. We have, I want to get a few more, but we've got our rain gauge. We've got our thermostat to be able to read temperature and humidity, obviously. But these are important because I'll end up taking this information and I just simply document it in the Google Calendar or whatever. And it's super important because now I can look back from last year and I actually can compare, what moisture, the storms and stuff that we were getting last year, and then look at this year and kind of make a little comparison. And then in that way, we can kind of see the patterns that do develop over time. And that basically creates more of a customized weather prediction almost sense, I guess. We can kind of look forward to a lot of these different patterns, I think, when we're more observant. And that's where I'm looking at now because last year it was actually, I think, just about on a similar, or it was the day after last year's day, we had a half inch of rain that came down. And then this year, yeah, the day after, so almost exactly a year, we had similar storm, but instead it dropped a lot of snow. But we ended up getting a similar amount of moisture. So it's kind of interesting, but also something to observe at the same time because if this is, we're going on year 2. So if we're going to continuously see this kind of pattern, this definitely will help our mindset and just looking and analyzing, what plants we want to do, what trees and stuff like that, because that's also getting into not only the macro climate of things, but we're also looking at the microclimates that we do have on our property. So the Zuni Waffle Garden, that area with the terrace and everything, that's kind of an example of the southern exposure microclimate that we have up front, because that area, like I said, is southern exposed. So it actually is going to stay a bit warmer throughout the year, essentially, a lot warmer than our north side. So that actually will dictate a bit more about what kind of plants, what kind of vegetation that we want to do up front or more on our southern exposure altogether on the property moving forward. And then it's also looking at the north part of our property, and then we actually just observe how much more grass, how much more diversity of kind of tree species that we do have, as well as shrubs and bushes. And we can kind of equate just the coolness and, it's not as intense during the summertime. So things are being allowed more to grow. Just the variety that is back there is able to grow a bit more. So we have kind of, I think it's almost like, the bigger picture is the macro, the overall climate. And then we have our microclimate, which I kind of labeled the north and south portions. But then it's almost, we can get even like further down the microclimates. I don't know I guess you would refer the mini micro climates that we will have throughout the property as well. Just like with the Zuni Waffle Gardens, as well as the Zuni bowls, those are actually creating somewhat of a microclimate with the bowl shape. They're protecting a lot of the vegetation from wind. It's gathering a lot more moisture in those bowls a lot of times. And then we're also just creating, I think, a little bit more secrecy with the plants in a sense, where sometimes it's harder for animals, rodents and stuff to kind of find that stuff actually. So that's where just this is I think a really big priority, just the weather patterns, observing all of these different patterns. And I think taking note is probably not a fundamental thing, but I think it's a crucial aspect, especially if we want to know more about our unique area, the unique weather patterns that we do have, because we can look at the weather stations and the weather apps and stuff like that, but those are really giving a general area. So unless you're within a few miles of the weather station, like the radar station or whatever that's giving out all of the statistics and stuff like that, for ourselves, we're so far away. That's where, it's a way different scenario. It could be raining a half an inch in town, in one of the towns around us kind of thing. But then where we're at, it could be completely dry, or we could be, completely drenched and it's dry, not too, 10 miles down the road kind of thing. So that's where it is kind of the difficult part, I will say, in trying to look at and analyze a lot of the weather patterns and looking at, how do we adjust our lifestyle to a lot of the weather and just, kind of the things that are going on. Um, I know that, it just be, especially because it's not like I went to school for meteorology or anything like that, studying the weather. So any regular person, I think, the best thing that we can do is just kind of like the old farmers and stuff like that, is having our hygrometer, or, the thermostat with our humidity and our temperature, but then also kind of the barometer that will, indicate the high or the low pressure. I know there's kind of a bunch of different kind of little gimmicky barometers and stuff like that out there, but even still, having just some of these basic little tools actually can give us a way better heads up before even the weather station or the news can give us, because we'll be able, just knowing or understanding at least, high and low pressures. And in the sense that high pressure, when we're talking weather systems and stuff, high pressure systems are equating to a thinner atmosphere. So we're bringing in a lot more of the UV radiation and heat, which is equating to a lot more of that heat funneling up and creating this dome, essentially, as it hits the higher parts of our atmosphere and kind of cools down and makes its way. But high pressure, especially too when we're looking at the map or like a radar, it has this clockwise circling. Whereas when we're looking at low pressure systems now, low pressure systems have, there's a lot more atmosphere actually. So that's where we're getting the cloud coverage and why we see the clouds start developing and stuff like that, at least a little bit. But low pressure systems usually equate to rain or moisture in that is coming our way or is in the atmosphere at least. And then we can also look at the thermostat and see, our humidity levels and stuff. So we can get really advanced with, how in depth you want to be. We could become full on meteorologists basically. And we can self-educate ourselves at least to a really good extent, because I think honestly, the weather apps are just as accurate as the weather stations and the weather people. So, all they're doing is just giving you the visuals, which are really nice, and a little bit of entertainment at the same time. But for ourselves, our own personal landscapes or homesteads and stuff like that, this is, it's a crucial component just for planning, like I've kind of stated already, but also in planning for the future. But even still, I think it's probably even more important if you haven't even bought a property yet, or if you're looking at property, if you're considering, or if maybe you just bought a property and you're not fully aware or fully knowledgeable about the patterns and stuff that are occurring. So I think this is super important, because then that will actually give you a lot more insight for your personal area, and then also for your own goals and what you're striving for. That might kind of eliminate maybe some of your ideas, but at the same time, it'll pretty much bring out a lot more space for other ideas that could be done, because that's the world of permaculture and that's the world of nature, is that there's so many different uses. There's lots of different designs, but the concepts, everything always ends up doing the same thing. That's why I'm a big advocate for just, the design is flexible, but it's the concept that is solid. Because it's just like the Earthship. The Earthship is the big example, because it's that concept altogether, but we can also see how many different designs that there are out there of these Earthships, but they don't use tires on all of them. Ours is that example. We've used the Gabion baskets. So that's just where, just the weather and all of this stuff is really crucial, and making adjustments based off of these is another aspect. Just being flexible in when we're designing permaculture landscapes or even our garden spaces and stuff like that, because knowing the weather and just the macro kind of scale of things, and then looking at our own properties with our microclimates and how we can create other further microclimates that so that we are able to grow, all kinds of different vegetation that maybe might not be able to grow in kind of the given conditions that we have. But and okay, there's a few little comments in here. General, always, yep, you're always putting your 2 cents in. Doing any electroculture? It might be something we're looking into. That's um, it's kind of an interesting concept, I think. I definitely have watched a fair amount of videos and seen a fair amount of, just the results, what people are getting and their own opinions. So it's definitely something to experiment with, and we'll probably have to experiment with that in the future here. So green the desert, or green in the Mojave Desert on the elephant farm. I just plan for drought and pleasantly get surprised when it rains. Yeah, that I think that is kind of one thing, with all these earthworks, with all these rainwater harvesting techniques and practices and stuff like that. I guess from my own opinion and my own experience, I guess at least, is that these are just about able to be used globally. I mean, whatever climate that you have, whatever weather patterns, because in one case, like for ourselves with our drier climate, yeah, the swales and the zuni bowls, all these earthworks are essential for stopping and slowing all of that sheet flow that happens during the monsoon rains and anytime we get significant moisture out here. And so that's what it definitely is playing a crucial part in controlling that water flow and getting it to soak and be stored in the soil at farther depths, hopefully, too. And so even in wetter climates, it's doing a very similar action. The basic concept, we're somewhat controlling the water. We're managing the water in a way where we're creating the pathways for where we want it to kind of go. And so that's where even in wetter climates we can use a lot of these different earthworks as for water management is a big thing. So we can kind of prevent a lot of flooding on our properties and stuff like that by creating these different earthworks that maybe they're not necessarily on a level contour or anything, but we're getting them in a way where we're slowing the water so it doesn't have as much momentum, but we're steering it away towards where we actually want it, whether it's a garden or at least, out onto the street, into the gutter kind of thing. So we don't get sandstorms out here per se. I mean, when the wind really kicks up, definitely a lot of the topsoil and dust is blowing all over. But otherwise, we don't get like the haboobs or anything like that, like down in Phoenix and stuff like that. We're strictly, for the most part, at least from what I've seen and what we've experienced here, we really just get the monsoon rains. So we do get the heavy winds because we are higher elevation. We're a bit above 5,000 feet. So we do get the higher winds, 30, 40, 50 mile an hour winds. The last week and a half, that's what we had been dealing with. So it's only been these last, like today and yesterday where it has been like this, sunny and not so cloudy anymore. So it's kind of nice. We definitely needed the moisture. That was a big thing. All that moisture is going to be super essential for this gardening season. And it is really nice because I got the waffle garden done up front. I actually I'm working on another video actually currently, and we're talking about the just rain garden concept in general. So that front area with the waffle garden and the terrace, that whole front area is going to be kind of a permaculture rain garden, so to speak. So we're going to be doing a bunch of different kind of techniques. We're combining a bunch of different stuff in that area, but overall we're kind of making it, like a personal garden area. We're going to make it nice. It's going to have paths and stuff like that, but it's also going to have all of the different rainwater harvesting design features on top of we're squeezing it in between a couple different swales as well. So I think I want to save that maybe talking point for the video because that goes into moisture soaking and stuff. That's not related to the weather. But that's the one thing I have been waiting for is all of this moisture actually, and that's why we've been doing some well, wanting to get the Gabion done so we can get inside and actually start a lot of our seeds and tree cuttings and stuff like that. But then now a lot more of the focus has been outside, getting a lot of our personal garden spaces situated and ready for the garden season. But I think that's just a crucial aspect, is letting them get their soak in. Um, and that just means that we don't have to water, because it's a little bit of our strategy at the same time is a little bit more lazy, you could say. So we do, we let wait for the rain before we do plantings and stuff like that. So, I mean, we're supposed to get more moisture this month, and it will be a little bit of observation. But otherwise, we're going to be leaving a lot of stuff up to the rain, because that's a little bit the direction we want to kind of guide the vegetation here. We don't want the vegetation to necessarily be reliant on us watering it or having a drip system on it. So that's a little bit where I do disagree with Sean Overton, putting those drippers on those terraces like he has. I mean, even if you get things established, and he's talking that, I'm going to cut the plants off the water, after everything gets established. Well, it's a little bit when we kind of consider that plants have a memory, and especially too, they're very adaptable. So when we're kind of babying them, like, babying plants like that, and we're kind of forcing, so to speak, things to grow, when we kind of cut off that lifeline, that will be the interesting part. I could be wrong. I definitely will say I could be wrong in kind of that experiment that he's doing, but it just, at least in my opinion and my thinking, the drippers, and then once he cuts that off, I mean, he's not going to have very much success, because those plants are adapted and they're waiting for that water, that consistent water to come, basically. So building soil, that's a whole different story. I think that's a great way if you're wanting to build soil super quick, because he's getting all that vegetation going. And that's, looking at his climate, he's got, definitely, that's the desert status, the stereotypical desert status right there. But at the same time, there was someone that was commenting about, well, if there's trees, it's not a desert. Well, Sean Overton has trees on his property, but he is definitely a desert with the amount of rain that he gets. So the trees don't dictate what, if a place is a desert or not. It's the rainfall, the average rainfall, which actually, if people don't know, actually does fluctuate. So places that are classified as deserts, if they get a really good storm or a lot of good moisture, their rain for that year might be above average. So that would actually put them above being a desert classification in just that instance. So that's where things just fluctuate year after year. And that's for our property even. I'm sure there's some years where we get less than 12 inches of rain. So we actually need to really look forward, not in a positive sense necessarily, but we do need to look forward to those kinds of weather patterns that we can potentially have out here. I mean, I think a really good indicator for ourselves even is, the 6 months that we went beforehand of no moisture. I mean, it was dry. It felt like it was summertime out here the whole winter. I was in sandals the whole winter. So that definitely, it's all these little insights that we get from the weather, and especially looking forward to the future as well, because whether people agree or not, the weather is changing, whether it's climate destruction or climate change, whatever. Everyone's got an opinion on that. That's fine. But despite the fact the weather is changing around us, and we need to be adaptable to those changes, just as the vegetation is. And so, and that being said, there's a lot of places that people are living in that are becoming more dry and more drought prone. And so that's where a lot of these earthworks, a lot of these rainwater harvesting practices, these techniques, all these ancient practices, in innovations and stuff, these all need to be brought back, because these are things that a lot of these cultures thrived on and were thriving for thousands of years before modern technology came in. And so that's even the biggest thing, that we can come nowadays in our modern society. We can come at things with ancient knowledge, but we can also combine it with modern technology or modern thinking at that. And so that's even the kind of the aspect we can look at with like the earthship model, or kind of just more the passive solar or burying in the ground kind of model for housing and stuff like that. This is something that many native tribes had done for thousands of years, hundreds of years in some cultures. And so this concept of being underground or tapping into the, the geothermal energy of the earth kind of thing, all these things are just lost knowledge that we're only slowly starting to bring back because we are starting to realize that we need more of this stuff, especially because for what the landscape is in a lot of our areas, the landscape is totally fine and we don't need to do any earthworks. But that's with the weather being consistent in what it had been and what it is kind of currently. So if our weather hasn't really changed, which most places you're hard pressed to see that, we actually, I think it's a necessity that we do start a lot of these practices and get creative in a lot of our designs and innovations and look to a lot of this ancient knowledge, so to speak, for how we can implement, but also modernize some things to our benefit, and especially for the coming future with all the cow farts. Yep, all the cow farts that are going to be in the air. Let's not mention all the people that we bring onto the planet every year. So we're going to complain about the food source, but not the consumer. So I know that some people might disagree about that, but it's like we're bringing more people onto the planet. And so that entails more plastics, more stuff needs to be made, more stuff needs to be produced, more food needs to be farmed, more houses need to be built in an unconventional manner with all of the chemicals and everything else that we need to make more of. So that's the big thing. I mean, it really isn't the cow farts. It's a lot of other things other than. So, I mean, and that's just the same thing with our landscape. A lot of people want to point the finger at these trees are the problem, at sucking up all of the water. And it's like if we're going to look at things at face value, we could definitely assume that the trees are just taking all of the water from everything else. That's why it's not growing. But if we actually used our thinking and actually thought about things and looked at, the actual physics of, trees, how they work, their tap roots, all that stuff, I think we'll actually realize that these trees are actually contributing a lot more to revitalizing the landscape than actually taking away. Despite the fact that there are these studies from, I know from Oregon University and maybe Arizona talking about the junipers taking out significant water and how these ranches and farms, mind you, these are people that want these trees gone to begin with. So they're doing these studies on these ranches and showing how that their wells and the water was brought back up because they cut the trees. So I think if people actually looked at these studies, you'd realize that there's a very big lack of detail to, I think, a lot of these studies because there's no back history on what the landscape used to be. If it did, was the water even at the level it was at previously? But there's one thing that we really can analyze if we actually look underneath the soil, and it's that our area is an old volcanic area, and so we have this thick layer of rock that creates kind of this deep down hard pan, so to speak. But I think it's evident when we actually look deep down, or not even deep down, just looking at the base of a lot of the trees we have, they're actually snug in between a lot of these different rocks and different rock crevices. And so if we understand microbiology and the different acids that microbes are putting out, as well as what the trees are putting out, we'll find that, the farmers that need to till their fields, that's not even compaction. We can see these trees are growing out of solid rock just about, despite they're growing out of the cracks, but, growing out of rock, I would consider that compaction. So, we have vegetation growing through it. So really looking at the trees, even in that light, we can see that these trees, especially looking at roots and the pressure that roots exhibit and stuff like that for pushing through soil, we can actually find that these trees are probably actually breaking up the caliche layer and breaking up a lot of the rock layer, as well as contributing a lot of their own carbonic acid from the photosynthesis process, as well as the different acids and compounds from the microbes that are breaking down the rocks underneath. So these trees I mean, it's just like anybody, if you just go look at the base of a lot of these trees. They've got so much grass, they've got so much different stuff and variety that's growing underneath them. The trees are not the problem. The climate that we have is part of the problem. The climate that we have, the weather patterns that we have, the intense sun, the intense heat, along with the cold and the wind, and we get snow. I mean, we have caliche in the ground, which is essentially calcium carbonate, which is lime, essentially lime. So when we're considering, how much moisture that lime even absorbs, the real culprit almost, or a bigger culprit of the landscape, is the caliche that we have. All this caliche that's sucking up a lot of this moisture, and it's in the solid rock form. So, it's how are plants supposed to even access that? And I'll tell you that they access that by getting more microorganisms in the ground, and we get more plants and vegetation growing to be able to do to have their photosynthesis process going on, and inputting more of the carbonic acids and different sugars and starches into the soil, feeding the microbes, which the microbes are breaking down all these different nutrients and compounds to create more nutrients for plants. So the symbiotic relationship is going on. And not to mention, if anybody knew anything about trees and microbes, it's like fungi is a big thing that is essential for a healthy ecosystem. And so that's the only way that fungi are really going to thrive in an ecosystem is with woody kind of material. So we need trees, we need shrubs, we need bushes that have like woody stems and stuff like that. So these trees are actually contributing a whole lot more, and especially contributing to creating a lot more of these microclimates on our property, enabling a lot more of the grasses and the shrubs and bushes to grow actually underneath. Because you'll find in next weekend's video we're walking around the property after the snow. We've got drone footage on that, so that's exciting. We get a bit more overhead view of everything. But we'll also see just kind of the 2 days that followed after that with the sunshine, and how much of the snow that was melting from the tops of these trees. So that's kind of a super big thing, because whenever there's any snow up here, all of this stuff is getting hit right off the bat in the morning and throughout the day, even from the sun. So we'll actually find the drip line around these trees because of all of that water that's heating up and melting and soaking into the ground. So when we're looking at that, we're actually getting pre-soakage from these trees, because that water is able to warm up quicker and actually penetrate the soil, as opposed to the snow that gathers up around all the bare areas and just around the trees kind of. But then also the water that drips off the trees is also slowly melting a lot of the water, or tongue-tied here, a lot of the snow that's around those trees as well. So contributing more to a slower drip, more water penetration, more water soakage, which will equate to more stuff growing in the future. So it's a big example for us to really take on how the climate and how our vegetation and how everything just interacts, and just how our ecosystem that we have right now functions. And just excuse me. And that's even the big thing is observation. I'm always going to talk about observation is super crucial, because without observation, we're going to make decisions that aren't necessarily, that might be good in the moment, but not in the long run. And for permaculture, at least the way I understand it, permaculture is the permanence. So we're looking at the future. We're trying to make as best of an educated guess as we can on the things that we do here that will be regenerative, but also still function even when we're gone or nobody else is around, kind of thing. So we'll get let's any more comments. Yeah, I think I found wild whispers. I found that babying them to a certain point does increase their chances of survival. Well, and it is the thing. We do need to baby things, but there's also a way of doing kind of a babying, but also like a tough love kind of aspect. And I think it kind of more so involves when just the potting process. So it's like definitely we can start out getting stuff in pots and planting them, but I think what we try to do here, I kind of experienced some other things, mixing too many nutrients in. And that's a big thing for our vegetation. Anything that we want to grow native here, we do need to be really careful about how we're mixing nutrients or compost and like soil mixes, because a lot of the native stuff, it's not necessarily used to a lot of fertility or a lot of, available stuff. So it actually likes really, depleted, not so good stuff soil. So we actually can kind of baby stuff by planting it in pots, but we also can kind of give it a little more tough love by just planting it with more of the native soil that we have here. It's always so tempting. We want to put in all the good stuff. I'm guilty of it. That's what I kind of made my mistake. I want to put all the good stuff in. Some plants respond really good to that, but not all plants do, and especially native plants. Depends on your area. If you're in a more wetter climate, your different vegetation, your area, the native stuff, it might be used to more fertile soil, more black gold, you could say. But for our sake, the conditions that we have here, we want to try to mimic those at least somewhat to an extent, but also, trying to give the plant, a better chance of survival. But that's all. I think it's kind of not the double-edged sword, but it is just that other aspect that, when we grow plants and kind of we don't baby them so much, we kind of almost throw them out into society here, into plant society. But when we don't baby them, we actually I think, in my mind, or opinion at least, we are helping with the evolution of those cultivars, those species, because whatever does end up growing through the rugged or really rough conditions, we're going to know that those genes or those genetics in those specific seeds, those ones that at least made it, those ones are actually going to be way better off going into the future. They're going to be way more adaptable. They're going to pass on those genetics to the future generations, as long as we can keep propagating them like that. So it's kind of, there's different, everyone's got different goals. And I think that's the thing. Personal garden space. Yeah. Maybe you want to baby stuff a whole lot because you're going to be in the garden all the time. That's your Zen spot. So it just makes sense. Yeah. To make it fertile, to baby everything, to coddle everything. Especially if you're trying to get a harvest and stuff like that. But it also, we can, have negligence on a lot of different species of plants and stuff like that, and plan our gardens accordingly too, so that I kind of like the garden space where it's like I can walk in and I don't really have to do too much stuff. It's all, walking into the garden is only more so about just looking at everything growing, seeing how everything's doing. Oh, maybe we need to top the dripper off a little bit with some water. It's a very lazy kind of approach, and that's a little bit how we want to do it. We want to take a little bit more of a lazy approach, because we don't necessarily want the vegetation or our landscape to be dependent on us. We want the landscape to be kind of that symbiotic relationship, just like the trees, the vegetation and the microbes. We want to have kind of that symbiotic relationship where we're creating things that help the plants and the vegetation, and they're also doing the same for us. But I think it's just like with hydroponics and stuff like that, we can take microbes and we can create a sterile environment, but plants and stuff will still grow. So it's kind of the same for us. We can be in our own little environment. We'll still grow and stuff. Same with the plants. They can still, without people, there's still all that stuff going on. So, but we can, just the way that we want to do things, at least everyone's different, but that's the way we want to live, is kind of that law of exchange, that symbiotic relationship with the landscape. And definitely just that homestead aspect of trying to do a lot of stuff for ourselves, but also we're trying to cultivate a business as well with the nursery as well as the consulting. So just a quick shameless plug. We got the new logos, new Growtreeorganics logos. I've got my sweatshirt. Can you see the sweatshirt? We've got new stuff. So we've got these two designs. Oh shoot, I got this other one too. I got the one underneath. So we got a couple cool designs. Maybe you can see. I'm not flashing anybody, I promise. So we got two designs up right now. I'm actually working on a few more. So we're gonna kind of have like the Growtree organics, the different tree lines. So that was kind of the idea. There's going to be all different bonsai trees. So there'll be like a lemon tree. There's going to be like a grape bonsai. There'll be bunch of different ideas I was thinking about. So we'll probably have some more too. Let's see. I know I was skipping through some people's stuff here. Washington, a little bit other stuff, and driveway in minutes. Yeah, lots, man. So much water can come down out here, especially during monsoon season, that's for sure. Wild Whisper as well, if you use a drip system, even if the trees did take most of the water, you can direct it where you want it without waste. Yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit too what, just the interconnectedness of all of our earthworks here. And a little bit what I advocate for people too, trying to interconnect everything, because that is like what Chip Wellington says, if there was something that was to happen, but we had, all of the rainwater harvesting garden space is kind of the example because of the swales and stuff. So all these little pockets of garden space and the terrace and stuff, everything, overfills and goes to the next garden space and to the next and to the next. And then eventually leads to the giant swales that some of the giant swales that we have, which then also overfill. So everything overfills to the next thing, to the next thing. And I definitely am a big advocate for, people trying to interconnect all of these things, especially if you want to do gardens, livestock management and stuff like that. We can use all these earthworks in a way, not just for rainwater harvesting, for plants and vegetation, trees and stuff, but we can use all these techniques for flood management, directing the water, maybe to livestock area, or, maybe for, if you got pigs or something like that, a big mud pit or something like that. But then that's also another thing that we do as well is with our compost piles, is our compost piles are built inside of the swales themselves, so that when there is significant rain or snow and stuff, all of that water is concentrated into those piles. So we can essentially keep those piles a lot more moist than having them just sitting above the ground, basically. So that's just the one big thing. It's like, we've only got so much time. I'm doing the consulting, doing work on the side. We're doing a lot of stuff. So it's kind of, we're working on videos at a time here. But we'll definitely have so many more videos talking about a lot more in depth of a lot of this stuff, especially the drip systems, just all the stuff we're growing. So we're getting to it. We're getting to it. Chip Wellington, how far have you dug? Is all hard pan rocks and stuff. I dug 3 inches on clay and it gets pretty rocky. 3 inches. We could probably dig an inch in a lot of spots and we're hitting rock already. So we've definitely got quite the rock landscape here. And that's what I'm saying too, even about the trees. It's like the trees are a really big indicator that they're able to tap into something right there. Granted that these juniper trees, they have a shallower root system, but they still have a tap root that is going down, at least 20 feet kind of thing, 20 to 30 feet. So people need to look up, do some homework, look up what these trees do, like look up what the root systems and stuff, because we've also got pine trees as well up here. Pine trees, the pinyon pines, at least, when they're, when they're at least even a few years old, their taproot can reach down 40 feet. A full grown sized pinyon pine, like a couple that we have that are super huge, they're like 30-foot tall trees. But some of these, those taproots are reaching down almost 120 feet. That is an indicator. If we know that kind of information, we can actually make a way better assumption. Like, okay, they're tapping into there's moisture down in these spots that are over here. So how do we tap some of these spots? Can we dig in some of them, or is it a rock pocket, or is it maybe that there's just a lot of different fissures or cracks in the rock itself that we have? Either way, it just equates that we need more vegetation. We need more plants growing. We need more stuff. We need more organic material. We have a clean slate here, so to speak. We started with a little bit of Bob Ross canvas here with some trees and stuff painted on. But we've got bare sand soil, very sandy, lots of drainage. So we can really assume that a lot of the moisture that we do get to penetrate into our soil is kind of sinking a bit too fast because of how sandy. We have a sandy loam here, but it's still sandy, so we have a lot of water penetration. So we could think that the water is at least getting far enough down into some of these cracks or the rock layer hardpan that we might have. See, we don't know this unless we get, like a geologist or someone with some radar scanning tools. We get real intricate of analyzing our property to find out actually what's going on. And all of these details would add up to, how we're going to design the landscape, where we're going to put things, vegetation, earthworks, more in-depth kind of stuff. So, but all that costs money. So the best that we can do is make a lot of observations and just come at things with a neutral mindset, instead of prejudgments, just thinking that the trees suck up all of the water. I mean, that's just anybody in the garden. I mean, it's just like anyone in this permaculture space. If you're already making assumptions off of one video, if you watch one of these videos on the channel or one video and you're making assumptions about someone's property, I hope you're not consulting people, because that's just not observation. You're not observing things. There's so many different variables that you need to know, different inputs of information to even make an actual assessment of things. So, yeah, and I digress here. Let's see, Broken Bolt Ranch. I started putting earthworks along the wall. I have running half a mile of my ranch. It collects a lot of water when we get rain. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, next to the wash. Yeah, especially if that wash is, very consistent, because we have a couple of washes close to us, and one of the washes is very consistent at running when we do get the monsoons and moisture and stuff. But we do have another wash that's closer that has a pretty deep, cavity kind of trench to it. And when I first came to the property, just for the 2 weeks to kind of get my bearings here, that rainstorm, that one did actually fill up. But we actually, since we've moved here, we have yet to see that one actually go and fill up again. So I might need to maybe make some clips of when I first got here, because I took a whole bunch of video of everything beforehand, and then also that wash. But that's where, yeah, this is, we can see these patterns and know too, just like with that wash, now we can make a little bit better assessment and say, it's like this thing only runs once in a while, but when it does come down, when water does come down this thing, it's coming. So we can make adjustments on that wash area and actually create, diversion swales, so to speak, where at least we're not interrupting the flow of the wash water. We're just allowing excess water to flow into some of the side earthworks from the side of the washes to collect that water. And so we can kind of make adjustments on the sizes and depths and just the configuration of things if we, having that kind of knowledge and looking at our own goals. At least, we want all the water, so we can make big ones, or we can have some of that water lead farther into the property and stuff like that. We can get more into key line design, especially if we're doing a lot more kind of farming and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't really talked about, and stuff that I do know, but I haven't made the videos on yet. And that's partially because we're just not at a lot of these different stages where I need to talk about it. And I don't like talking about it beforehand most of the time on some of these videos, because everybody comes in with so many dumb comments, and it's just like, think about what you're commenting on. You have time to type. So it's sometimes people just don't put all of their thinking power into stuff. So I like to make the videos when we're actually kind of doing some of this, so we actually have some reference, at least to create a little less confusion. There's always confusion with these videos. Wild Whispers, right, and fungi like moisture and shade. Your issue is the intense sun, so more shade is what I think you need. Yep, couldn't agree more with that. Fungi are definitely important, and they need the shade and they need the moisture. But that actually kind of ties in more so, not ties in, but to be honest, the fungi that we have, what's really actually cool about the trees, the juniper trees that everyone wants to chop down, the fungi that they are cultivating underneath these trees is actually really important, because this is fungi that's adapted to the area. It's adapted to the drier climate. We actually can see mycelium when we dig under a lot of this mulch, and it's super dry. It's crumbly dry, but we have mycelium, and we also have Actinomyces bacteria. So that's a more anaerobic kind of bacteria. It looks really similar to like mycelium, like fungi, but it's actually a bacteria. So it's only, there's kind of minute things you can kind of see in the difference between them to identify, but the surefire way is to look under the microscope and you can see the difference. But the bacteria version kind of makes little strands just the same like fungi. But we do have that here. So that's kind of a super crucial aspect. And especially with the waffle garden, why I want to add most of the organic material from these trees to any of the earthworks, to any of the garden beds, to our compost, to our bokashi ferments and stuff like that, because then we can input this kind of biology, and we can kind of further propagate it, because obviously it's adapted and it's well suited for our area at least. So we want to take advantage of that, because that's a fungi, and that's a fungi that's in this really harsh environment. So take advantage. We want to cultivate that. Let's see. Let's see, Chip Wellington or something like that, but I don't know if that. Are you for like referring to like maybe neighborhoods or something like that? I mean, there's a bunch of the landscape companies that we can reach out to. I didn't have much luck with a couple of them. They kind of like not shunned me away, but they made it seem like I would be a liability or something like that if I was taking the landscape material that they were chopping from a landscape. It didn't make any sense to me. So I know that there are a few companies that probably will do that, but also we can go to the landfill. The landfill is full of all the wood chips, all the organic material. I do want to say I want to be very careful with that stuff though, because that's a big mystery pile. Even though we can see, yes, it's wood chips and woody material, I do want to be a little cautious, because we don't know where that stuff is coming from. I don't know what landscape that's coming from. I don't know what they've sprayed on the lawn, fertilizers, fungicides, any stuff like that. It definitely could impact the compost pile. But our friend has already kind of mixed some stuff together, and it's kind of promising and good to see. It was good smelling stuff, how he mixed it. And then also there was a lot of good fungi and mycelium that was forming on a lot of the sticks and the carbon material. So, but it still is. I still want to be cautious about that. We want to definitely be cautious when we're getting stuff from outside sources, especially if we don't necessarily know the conditions, of certain farms or the landscapes. We don't know if they're spraying anything like that. I mean, sprays, fungicides, insecticides, all that stuff. That stuff travels for miles. So it's like even organic farms. People don't think about that. Even organic farms might not be technically organic. Even if they're doing all of the practices, if they're within range, within so many miles of other agricultural farms that are using pesticides and other harmful sprays, all that stuff travels, and it actually is getting on your organic food and stuff like that. So fun fact. Not. While whispers of snow condense back air rather than soak in than rain, correct? The snow does if we get a significant amount, we are melting and we are getting water dripped in. What I have noticed is, because we do have such an intense sun, it depends on how it needs to be, a thin enough layer of moisture, but we can see actually, a lot of evaporation when the sun is hitting a lot of different, stuff around here. If there's a light enough layer, we'll see all of that just turning into mist. So essentially, yeah, we are losing moisture to evaporation even in the wintertime. And just with the sun being out in general. So yeah, shade, mulch, getting this ground covered is going to be really important, just like with the rotational grazing. So that's partially getting more of the organic material into the soil. And then, as we continue developing the landscape, yeah, that's where we're going to continue this lasagna layer of stacking more. The goats and chickens will be around more. I mean, all this is a continuous process. So cold water, yes, they do. It's all about propaganda. That's what I'm saying. It's like these studies, look at where the studies are coming from that are talking about the trees. These studies are coming where they're going to farmers and ranchers. These are the people that it's already a biased study. These are people that already want these trees gone to begin with, because they want to make room for more grasses for the cows, or more room for whatever agriculture or plant that they're growing. They're vegetable growing. Yep. Lasky land, comprehend and copy nature, let the plant teach. Yep, that's yeah, Jadam, organic farming as well. I mean, there's so many methods. Like that's the big thing. Look at all of the diversity around this world, that it really should give us that insight that there's not just one way to do it. There is, these kind of mutual, not singular laws, but just all these concepts that come together that are done in different ways, but basically come together as one result, if I can get my words here together. So it's like, there's so many different ways to compost, but overall, what's the basic aspect? We're just breaking down organic material and making stuff available for plants, for worms and stuff. I mean, any composting method, that's the basics of it. So there's multiple methods, but same result. Just like with the Earthship, multiple different designs, same result, as long as we're building things correctly. So that just goes with a lot of different things. It goes with a lot of our own thinking as well. If we want to get philosophical, a lot of us have different modes of thinking, but it always ultimately it leads us to very similar results. A lot of us know different methods, all these different rainwater methods from different cultures, and we're all taking these different methods to our own property. But what are we doing? We're all coming together with a very similar result. We're regreening, we're revegetating, we're promoting life, we're promoting nature. So it's a commonality, and there really shouldn't be any negativity in this space or debate, more so, or people saying you should do or you need to do. There's so many different ways. We don't need to do one thing. We shouldn't do just one thing or should do certain things. Like, nature is diverse, so we need to diversify our thinking as well as diversify our ways of achieving the same results, just like nature. That's a juniper bonsai. Well, no, I don't know if this one on my shirt's a juniper bonsai. I don't know what it was, kind of a bonsai. You could say it's a juniper, but it doesn't have the needles. It's got more of the leaves on it. So yeah, actually, there's a cherry blossom design I was doing, a bonsai mango tree. Yeah, I wanted to try and get as many different kinds of trees as possible for that. Yeah, James Barrows, yeah, a cheap solar power drip system. Yeah, there's a bunch of different kinds of drip systems. I know people know about the Oya pots and stuff. I have conflicting opinions about the Oya pots. Just my 2 cents, at least, about the Oya pots is, realize that those pots, wherever you're putting them, that's essentially, even if it's slowly dripping that water into the moisture, that's a hot spot, or that's a wet spot, you could say. So we're actually going to get a lot more roots that are going to congregate around that pot or those Oya pots. And that's what you're going to have to do every year. You're going to have to pull those out. You're going to have to sweep all the roots out. That's fine if they don't clog. That's the best part, if they don't clog. But a lot of times they will clog. Those roots, the root hairs, roots can get really, really freaking small. So I think we undervalue, plant roots and what they're actually doing down there. But that's why I actually prefer more of the drip system. The drips do the same thing, and I'm actually more into the gravity-fed drip system because I definitely had done a type of drip system with 55-gallon barrels on our old property with some of our garden beds. And basically that 55-gallon drum, I had multiple like half-gallon drippers. That water was lasting almost 2 full days of just constant dripping. So I've seen kind of the evidence of that lasting, and that's all we really need to do. The Oya pots are a constant feed, so those are kind of good. And that's also my other opinion too. It's like those are supplemental. You're still going to have to end up watering the plants. Those Oya pots, unless you stack 50, a bunch of them all in the area kind of thing. If you're just doing one per little area, it's really just supplemental moisture to the soil, and it makes the soil just less hydrophobic. So when you do water, you're actually going to soak the soil. But otherwise, you're still going to have to water with the Oya pots. So that's just my opinion, at least. Let's see. Planting sorghum, says Broken Bolt Ranch. Yeah. Yeah, sorghum. And sorghum. Oh, shoot. What was the other one I was just thinking of? There's a couple different varieties of stuff. We're going to do wheat. All the different cover crops and stuff that we're doing here and that we're going to be doing. A lot of that stuff will be good fodder for the goats and for the chickens, and then just creating that living mulch as well as getting more organic material into the ground. So, let's see. Bonanza Transit. You were covering the kids' eyes. I wonder why. What was going on? Oh, I wasn't like trying to flash anybody. I must be okay. Yeah, I wasn't trying to flash anybody. Let's see, James Barrows. This is probably a foolish question, but I have to ask: is it stupid to use drip and plant trees, etc., early while still building out the soil, making a small spot for them, and hoping to work outward? It's really up to you, honestly. I don't think it's necessarily foolish. I think it just depends on our own goals. If that's what you want to do, not everyone wants to necessarily kind of do this like this succession of planting. Where it's like grasses and weeds, and then the bushes, and then the trees. Not everyone has the patience. Some people just want to get right to the trees, which is totally fine. Just know that you are going to have to baby it. You are going to have to put in extra work that might kind of take the fun out of gardening a little bit. But you are going to have to do extra work because you're going to have to kind of continuously give it water, but you're also saying that you're building the soil. So that's kind of part of the thing, is that it's a little bit, unless the stuff is already like, I hope you're not composting in the on the mounds or anything like that next to the tree. I wouldn't suggest that. Pre-composted stuff, that would be totally fine. Just know that, unless you're just top dressing, that you just don't want to disturb the plant really at all. But otherwise, just kind of how I like doing things, at least, it is letting things acclimate, but also accumulate the moisture. So just all the earthworks that we have chiseled out so far, that's a big thing. They've all started to gather, slow, soak, and store more water, so that by the time we kind of are ready, ready to plant and get to all of these things, now all of these earthworks, at least a good majority of the ones that we have done now, all these have had the monsoon, and they've had a winter to get to gather moisture. So kind of two moisture events, and that at least is a way better footing than if we had just started the swale and then we try to plant and everything when it's all super dry. Guaranteed, we're definitely going to have to water a whole lot more. But I think, just from my experience at least, and just following at least a little bit too, because Jeff Lawton he talks about this as well, with letting the swales sit for about 1 to 2 years. So he's kind of talking about letting things get 1 or 2 good seasons of soaking before you really start planting trees and stuff like that. So that I definitely try to follow that, just because it's a very similar approach to nature. So we're trying to follow a lot of nature and stuff like that. Before I forget, I didn't mention about the shameless plug. Our shirts, sweatshirts, those are at spreadshirt.com / Growtreeorganics. I have the link in the description box in every video for the most part, and it's a really good way you can support the channel, but also you can get some cool gear, since we're going to be coming out with some cool new designs. And I'm repping the gear, so why not everyone else? I think it's pretty neutral too. So, but Growtreeorganics, we're doing the consulting as well. I know James, we've got some consultation coming up. Well, when we reschedule that, I know that. So just let me know when you want to schedule that, man. And no worries, I'm still here. So we've got consultations, Growtreeorganics consultations. If you're new to permaculture, if you need some ideas, or if you just don't know, you've got all these ideas, but you just don't know where to start or how to organize your property, kind of thing, I definitely can help you with that. Help you organize. We can do the plot plan map. We can do all kinds of organizing and planning things out, even with homestead type. Just kind of, if you're trying to do the permaculture, or if you just want the little personal garden, or if you're just trying to raise animals. So have at least some knowledge in livestock management. So regenerative livestock management. We're talking about soil health, as well as sustainable building. Obviously, well, not obviously, but it's a decent amount of things. I think most people, when they're homesteading, that's I can definitely help anybody out with that. And especially, we're coming up to the garden season, so anyone considering that, definitely give me an email, and love to help you get yourself situated and organized. Let's see, Broken Bolt Ranch. I traded for a wood chipper, and when I trim my juniper trees, I chip them up for the reason I know that they are clean. Yeah, that's one thing too with the junipers is that they actually have antimicrobial and antibacterial properties. So that's what makes even the fungi and the microbes that are underneath the tree that much more important because that would almost signify that those are a bit more resistant microbes to just the different things that trees do and other plants to eliminate. So they're just tougher microorganisms is what I'm saying, especially. So that's a big thing why we want to cultivate those guys back there. So James Barrows, thank you for not only giving answers but helping to really provide context. I think it makes sense to do it just as you suggested. I appreciate it, James. I mean, that's just the big thing. I mean, I find a lot in the permaculture world, a lot of the videos and stuff, people just don't explain things all the way. And I think there's a lot of gaps in a lot of the explanations in permaculture. And that's why I even did the first live talk on kind of the misconceptions. Or no, that was the second episode, actually. Do you need a permaculture certificate or do you need to take the permaculture course? Take a listen to that one if you didn't. These are actually on, I think, like the YouTube podcast thing or something like that. So if you're ever looking around for podcasts, this is now on podcast form, I think, too, for the playlist, at least for all the GTO talks. Get a drink of apple juice. All right. Let's see. I have an idea to make a show out of rock. Yeah, Chip Wellington, go for it. We did the Nature Depot skits a little bit. Not many people like those so much. It's a little too PG for people. Maybe it's not funny enough. Maybe it needs a bit more. Manager Basalt needs to be cussing some people out or something. Maybe then people will watch it. James, yeah, for the record, even before our meeting, Brandon has been amazing, and I am so happy I wrote in. So yes, A+++. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, James. Yeah, just let me know, man. Whenever you're ready. We got all summer, dude. We got all summer. I mean, it's like you got a lifetime. So that's one thing too. It's like, I know it can be exciting when we're first starting our properties and like we want to get out, we want to start like doing stuff. And that sometimes it can really just be more overwhelming, like once we get there, especially if we're really excited and we have a whole lot of ideas. It's like our brain wants us to do 50 things all at once kind of thing. But then we slowly realize that we're one person with two arms and can only do so many things. So, I mean, taking it slow, that's the big thing. Take it slow. Because now, James, even still, you can look at your own property more so too. And if you wanted, you can look back on a lot of the channel videos here and see for yourself, well, maybe, okay, I see my property has, kind of something like this. And he did this over here, this kind of earthwork. So now, you at least have time for yourself as well. You can get a lot more analysis on your own goals and what you want to see on your property so that when we do talk and meet, then it's like you can come at me with something really cool that maybe, it's like maybe just need help with where to place it kind of thing. So I'd love to help with that. Otherwise, I'm always full of ideas. I've got so many different combinations of things in my mind. Like I said, the rain garden video that I'm working on, that's like, we're combining different kind of rain garden, like personal garden practices and design features, but then we're kind of combining it with more of these permaculture features, the permaculture earthworks and the bigger swales and stuff like that. So that's the really cool thing to me, at least, is like when we know a lot more of these basics, we really start getting into the intricacy of how we can design these things. And this just really kind of leads back to why the weather is super important, why we need to understand our patterns, why this needs to be a priority to check on the weather, maybe have a couple multiple weather apps, and also maybe watching the local weather news and stuff like that. These are all super important because these actually can really help with how and what kind of earthworks that we do do. So it's like, even for our sake, we have a lot of wind. We have high wind up here, which is definitely a lot of erosion. But then we also have the heavier rains. So if we analyze things a little bit in that way, we could make not an assumption, but we could actually design things where it's a lot more of the Zuni bowls and a lot more just bowl basins, shallower swale kind of features. Because if we're building things too high, we're creating susceptibility for plants and stuff to be whipped around. I mean, we're exposing things even more so is what we're doing, and especially for our climate. And just the example that we see even from nature around our property in different parts, being below kind of the soil level or the ground level shows a really big advantage, not only for the rainwater harvesting, but just for the microclimate that it creates, for those areas, whether it keeps it from being hit by so much wind or that it actually kind of keeps either warmer or colder temperatures kind of thing. So, yeah, Kyler Richardson, I love Nature Depot. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I'll maybe do a work on a few more of those in the future here. We'll see. We'll see. Anyone else got any more questions or comments? I think I've talked at least enough about my own opinion and thoughts on the priorities of weather and patterns, and I'm sure I've been plenty redundant. As is nature. Nature is redundant. All this stuff is redundant, so no one can be mad about the redundancy and if I repeat things, because that's all nature does. All this stuff just repeats and is redundant. That's so. Uh, yeah, appreciate it, Chip Wellington. Bonanza Transit. I should send some pictures. 13 years of tree fail to way more of the success. What do you mean? Like you cut down all of the trees? So 13 years of cutting all your trees, and it's way more successful. I guess you'd have to define that. Like, what's successful? More grass growing? Is there more trees growing? Like, that's the thing. See, we're all on different levels of like, what is success? Like, what is permaculture? What is a permaculture food forest? What's rainwater harvesting landscape? What design? Everyone's different. That's the thing. My success is going to be way different than your success. And that's what we, I think, all have to just respect for each other, that we're all just doing things differently, but we're all coming to similar results. And that's, I think, just the beauty that, and we all should be kind of, I think, a little thankful that we're not all the same, right? It'd be really a boring planet Earth if we were all the same, just thought the same, did all the same stuff. There's a level of doing very similar things, but I mean, we all still need to kind of have our own identities. We're all different people. We've got different thoughts, different opinions, different goals, different likes, dislikes, all that stuff. So I think I'm going to end it here, though. I really appreciate everyone that did show up and hung out for a little bit. Anybody that popped in, appreciate it. I hope there was some valuable information here, as I do hope that there's valuable information in each of these live podcast talks, whatever we want to call them. I guess I kind of think of them as podcasts just because I'm talking. We'll get the microphone set up here soon. Once we get this next greenhouse set up in this little corner that I'm kind of standing next to in the greenhouse, I do want to set up a little bit for doing more of these talks. So it'll be, the in the greenhouse kind of talk. So not many permaculture podcasts for some reason that aren't talking outside. Why aren't any of these permaculture podcasts outside talking about permaculture stuff? That we're talking about nature. We need to be outside talking about nature. So that'll be maybe even the future too. It's like if we get, Starlink or satellite or something, that'll be better service. So I actually can like walk around the property. We actually can kind of be almost like a web seminar, so to speak, if I actually have valuable information to kind of talk about. Otherwise, at least if we can kind of show and showcase a little bit the different stuff we've got going on here, get a little bit more close on, is anything growing here? What's growing? What is it? What are you going to be growing? Stuff like that. Otherwise, yeah, definitely please check out our Spreadshirt and our Amazon wish list. Support the Green Guardians channel. You can sign up on the Patreon, or you can be on the YouTube Green Guardians. And we really appreciate everyone's support. James, I know you're a member, so I really appreciate your support of the channel, as well as the Greening the Desert project. We're getting into springtime, so we've got our list. I know Richard Day, he might not be on here. Richard Day, he had sent a bunch of seeds, grass seeds, some different cover crop seeds and stuff that we're going to be able to use on the property. So really appreciate that. If anybody, really appreciate everyone's support. If you feel the need, you definitely can see the links of the different ways you can support the channel. Remember, I like the shirts. We're gonna do more shirts. I might get some like sweatpants and stuff like that. We'll get all matchy and stuff. We'll see. But otherwise, appreciate everyone that watches the channel. If you watch and you are subscribed, well, whether you are subscribed or not, thanks for watching. That supports the Greening the Desert project as well as the Gabion Wallapini project. So really appreciate everyone. We've got more stuff to come. We are just getting into the season and we are inching closer to the monsoon rain season, which I think that'll be pretty exciting since we've got more earthworks on the way. We've already got earthworks done, so we get to see more of the water action soon enough. But for now, appreciate it, everyone. If I say that 50 more times, appreciate it. We'll see everyone next week.